Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today to the first official episode of the Local Worship Project. We do have some other episodes in archive from people from before, but we want to prioritize this episode here today as the official relaunch of this brand, the Local Worship Project. On today's episode, we have David Pickett. David is an amazing guy in Essex, London. He's doing some incredible things with young people out there and targeting just this generation that's being missed in his area. And so we want you to just listen to his story, listen to what he's doing out there and what he wants to offer you if you have anything that you need when it comes to his skills and his personal touch with ministry. So let's get into the interview. Here's David. All right. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on to the Local Worship Project. So good to have you on. We tried doing this a little bit a while ago, but having to re-record this from some technical difficulties. So thanks so much for coming back and being a part of this project as we try to unite people in their local areas to further the gospel and the kingdom in their local communities. So David, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? Just tell us your story, man. We'll start with you. You got the floor.
Sure. So my name's David. I'm from, as you can probably hear, the UK. I'm from a little town called Hitchin, which is based about 20-30 miles north of central London on the main train line. And I go to a church called the Hub Church. We're a church that seeks to reach 20s and 30s, which I fall into the bracket of. And I suppose the reason that I absolutely love the Hub Church and the reason that I'm part of it is very much part of my story. I grew up in church. I then kind of left church for a few years. And what really brought me back to church was relationship. So I formed a really good friendship with one of the workers of a church in town. And through that relationship, I ended up coming back into church. So I've always been really keen on church that kind of looks like people with other people, as opposed to anything about what's happening at the front or what's kind of happening necessarily on a Sunday service. So for me, the chance to come back into a church like the Hub Church after university and everything has been a really exciting opportunity. And it's a great little place to be. We've got a small little town by probably a lot of people's standard. There's about 36,000 people. And our heart is to create a space that is just different, that is somewhere where there is a completely safe place to explore faith, no matter where someone's come from. And the thing that always strikes me every single week is that, I'm a Christian, but I've got loads of friends that aren't. And I want to create an environment where they can come and meet Jesus for the first time and it not be weird. And that's exactly what kind of my heart longs for. And it's really great that is exactly what the Hub Church also longs for as well. So that's who I am, I suppose.
That's cool. So with your community, just them working with each other the way that you're speaking about right now, what are some of those things that they're longing for when it comes to church? What are some things that your community is just kind of starved for right now? Is it the age group? Is it the, other demographics as far as like orientations, right? What are some things that really are in that community that they're hungry for the gospel to hear?
Yeah, that's good. I think we're at a really interesting place actually, because I think it's a classic God thing. Whenever you go after one group of people, other people follow, because good news travels fast and the gospel is fiery in that sense. So I think we've been absolutely abundantly blessed with so many people coming to faith for the first time and seeing so many people completely transform their lives really over the last decade since the idea started and then through to deployment. And the stage we're at now is that we really want to, I suppose we're really hungry to see God move more in our communities. So we're really keen to get people to get involved with how we can take not just church but Jesus ultimately into some of the more challenging areas within our community and potentially reach some more demographics and people that weren't on the cards, if you like, a few years ago and weren't kind of part of almost the original push. But actually, we're now seeing that there's a need and that there's an opportunity for us to do that. It's just having the right people to go, you know what, I've got a really good relationship with this organization or with this pub or with this hockey team or whatever it is. How can we build those relationships to further the kingdom?
Yeah.
Basically, is what hunger is at the moment.
It's funny. I hear a ton about like the UK and like the pub scene, right? So like that's basically what to
Yeah.
us was like there is the coffee bar scene. So like we drink coffee all the
Mm.
time, and that's where we fellowship. That's where we hang out. I mean, there's some of that whole. We go to the local bar and do some stuff too, and it depends on what denomination you usually are for how lax they are with that kind of stuff. But yeah, in the UK, man, like what's the ministry like in the pub? What is it like being in the pub with some people and just relaxing and talking with them? Why is that such a cool demographic and such a cool area to have conversations that circulate around the Lord?
Yeah, I think as you say, British culture has revolved around the pub for hundreds of years. So it is very much a melting pot of ideologies, of thought, and it's kind of one of the only places where we just get together and there's almost no conversation off limits a little bit, and it's a very intimate and a classic quintessentially British pub with a roaring fire and that's oak kind of smell in the air and a nice clear ale that has been brewed from a local brewery. It's fantastic. But I think the thing that always strikes me is that the pub is such a normal place for people to go, and it's a completely neutral space to have conversation. So we hold our carol services, for example, always in pubs, and we have done for nearly 10 years. And one of the amazing things about that is that singing Christmas carols and being in a pub are two completely neutral, normal activities for someone to be doing. So combining those and yet introducing this supernatural kind of element to that, and it's such a good opportunity for people to come into an environment that they know, that they love, that they're comfortable in, and to encounter something that they don't know yet. And,
Huh.
and that's kind of what we find is that the more we do these events in those spaces, the more we see God work as well through that.
Do you find people are any more like open to receiving or like telling their stories maybe when they're just relaxing with each other in their own environment because of that?
Yeah, that's 100% it. I think that's exactly it. I think when you're in someone else's territory, almost people feel naturally comfortable, and they kind of the thing that we find, I think, ultimately is that particularly in the UK, you can't go out and invite people to a church building because they just think you're weird, and they don't
Yeah.
get it. And they go, unless it's the big church in town that's been there for 1,000 years. People are like, what do you mean your church meets in a warehouse, or your church meets in an odd looking building that doesn't resemble anything what they think a church should look like? So there's this
Mm.
immediate negativity and this kind of questioning barrier. But the minute you say, hey, we're going to actually hang out in the pub together on Tuesday, do you want to come and hang out with us? People go, well, I'll be going to the pub anyway, so why, of course. And so there's a natural kind of easing of those kind of questioning thoughts almost. And so yeah, people just open up and they're happy to share their story. They're happy to ask questions as well. And I think so much of what we do, we hold our Alpha course actually in a pub as well, and we do it over pizza and pints, which is how we do Alpha. And one of the amazing things I think is that even the staff that work in these establishments then get to know what's going on. And we've actually had it recently where staff have actually kind of inquired about what's going on in this room, because we're meeting and again we're meeting in someone else's territory. So it's kind of like what's happening in there? What's that random group of people doing? And say, hey, we're actually chatting about Jesus. And that's how it starts. We're not kind of hiding ourselves away in some kind of dusty old stone building, but we're actually in the places that people are, and we're not ashamed of it. We're not scared of it, and also we're not. It's almost, I think, there's a fear, particularly in the UK, of the fact that churches are kind of secret organisations hidden away with loads of money,
Mm.
and everyone's a bit weird. But by us sitting in a pub, we're kind of challenging that narrative, and people realise we're not just some weird cult that meets on a Sunday, but we're real people with real lives that have a real relationship as well. And so all of those things kind of get unpacked when you're meeting in a pub, basically, which is why it's
Interesting.
great, I think.
That's cool. Like, I mean, there's so many pictures that come to mind when I'm hearing you talk about that. So I'm thinking about Jesus walking into where people were, right? So like all the times where he's met, it's like he's with people in areas that other church leaders look at and it's like, what are you doing, man? Like what is that about? But he's always with them. and he's going into them. I think that's super cool. That's a really rad way to think about ministry and how you should be serving the people in your community. Now you're talking about all of this with the pub and the relationship and like all this cool stuff. COVID-19, man. So, I mean, we got this crazy time right now where COVID-19 is hit. It is still super active as far as what it's doing right now, depending on when this episode releases of the podcast, right? It may already be where relationships starting to come back. But as of right now, as we're recording this, it's still very much a reality that we're kind of curious what church is going to be like when this is all over. So as I think about you and your communities, what do you think it's going to be like when you start getting back into the swing of things after COVID-19 has hit? What do you think?
I think I had just a really interesting conversation actually, just as before we recorded this with some people from church. And I think one of the interesting things that we were saying was that it's during a time like this that you realize what's important. And during this time of coronavirus and COVID-19, we can't meet, we can't have, fancy light displays. We can't have, nice materials at the front of church. We can't have, projected lyrics from Keynote every week. We can't have fancy videos. We don't have any of that stuff that we've almost come to expect in quite a consumer way from church. So my hope is that, and my heart is that when we get back together, there's going to be a rawness to our worship and a rawness to our services, because we've kind of realized that actually that stuff doesn't matter. What's actually paramount to us is Jesus and our relationship with each other. And hopefully that translates very easily into the fact that maybe some of those things that we put an emphasis on, and there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with any of those things, but maybe the emphasis shifts slightly and actually we come back and we go, well, we can just do it like this because that's super chill and super easy to do. And we don't need to have a huge production value to it, because actually we just want to come and hang out with each other. And isn't that the point of what we're doing? And that's kind of what I think might start to sow the seed actually of what the church starts to maybe look like a little bit when we come back.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree with that more. I really hope, like, that's my heart's desire, is like roles change, focus changes, and people are just all about that community, that relationship, and all the other things that used to be important start to drift away. I'm seeing, as I'm in conversations with people on like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and things like that, the conversation comes up a lot. That's why we're talking about it. We will be talking about this for a few different episodes with other people, because the reality of this is some people, when we're chatting, are just, nope, goes right back to it, right? So people are just going to build that wall right back up, and we're back doing our own thing because we want to get back to that thing we knew, that routine, the thing that was comfortable and made it church for us. So when I hear that, I kind of almost get sad, like in my heart, like I'm thinking that God just tore down this huge wall and he's been exposing idols everywhere, especially in his church, where we've put other things above him. And so I know in our church, like the thing that we're focusing on right now is we kind of like have this, I guess, like, for the lack of better words, and I heard this somewhere else, but it's like a scorecard, right? So like you get done with your service and you have some trusted people tell you, here's how you did with these things. And that's good for upping your production level, which, let's be honest, production gets a nasty word for no reason, right? You're producing something. I mean, how much does the Bible tell you about producing good fruit, right? So it's a good thing to do well in production. I want to just be very clear with that. It's very good to do well with production. However, if the production is not producing fruit that is of the Spirit, but if it's just about producing great quality, that's not spiritual at all. That's not biblical at all. It's not Holy Spirit birth at all. Like, that's just us doing something very well in our own means. So this scorecard, right? Instead of it being like, how did we do with not distracting people from this, right? Or how do we do with lighting or audio, or how do we do with our transitions, all that kind of stuff, changes to how close do we bring people to God today, right? How relational was our service today? When people walked out, what were they talking about? Were they talking about God or were they talking about us? And that kind of a thought, like where are we starting to draw this scorecard from? And what are we okay with us not being able to do and God being able to do, right? And how can we move out of the way to let him do that now, as he just blew all this up? So you're just making me think about all this stuff. I know I'm ranting now and I need to stop and let you talk some more, but you're just making me think a whole lot when it comes to this stuff. So I think about, like, you guys, do you do a lot of church in a building, or is it mostly just in life groups, small groups? What do you call that? How do you guys operate with your church normally?
Sure. So we have two communities on a Sunday, with a few kind of other groups as well. But effectively, our two big services, we might call them. Again, we language, I think, is really important, and language, I think, really has played into all of this stuff around how we relate to our culture and our people. Because using even a word like services, it's quite a formal word. It makes people kind of go, "Oh, what's that? Or do I need to dress up?" And that's the kind of immediate reaction when you ask someone in the street, "Do you want to come to this service?" When actually we say that we meet in our communities, and therefore people are immediately like, "Oh, it's just a community meetup." There's less barrier to entry, it seems, from that. So we meet in two different buildings. In the morning we meet in another church's church building, because they've grown so big they use another building for their church. And then the evening we use a theatre, a small kind of theatre bar, to meet as well. And again, part of that is so that it's both locational, so that's located next to Wetherspoons, which is a huge pub chain in the UK, and it's right next door to that. So it means we can continue the conversations directly afterwards at the pub, but it also means that people from the pub have to use an almost the same entrance when they're coming into the space. So they kind of can immediately see, well, there's this church, and they might only ever kind of just see the name and see the banner, and that's it. But it's that constant sowing of the seed that every Sunday there's that church that meets in the building next to Wetherspoons, and people start to pick up on that, and they start to go, "Hey, aren't you the people that meet next to Wetherspoons?" And there's all those kind of fun conversations that happen. But that's how we meet on a Sunday. That's how we gather, is probably the best language to use around that. And then after church in the evening, we go to the pub as standard every week, and just to kind of continue on and socialize. And then throughout the week as well, we meet in mini hubs, which are little groups of people looking to go deeper, all centered around activity of some kind. So that might be anything from craft making through to alpha, or prayer, or worship, or Bible study, or anything in between. We've done dog walking right the way through to kind of, cooking for each other, and all those things as well. So it kind of, what we're really trying hard to do is, we don't want to overburden someone's week with church. I think an easy mistake to make is to give someone the opportunity to come to church every single day. And the problem with that is that you never go into the real world, because you just go to church stuff every day. But we really want to create environments where people can mix up their week with groups of social church people, but they're also accessible to people outside the church that might want to join those. But there's also loads of opportunity and events that we do that mean that we can just invite our friends to, and whether that's a pub quiz, or a little event we'll put on, or whatever that is, it means people can just come in and come and go. And no matter where someone's at in their faith journey, regardless whether they come on Sundays or not, is not necessarily that relevant to kind of the bigger picture piece as well, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to talk about something real quick, but first I want to ask you, what is a pub quiz? So it's a total naive American question, right? So what is a pub quiz? Because I think I know, but I'm curious.
So a pub quiz is a staple of British culture, and effectively you get into teams of, probably I'd say 4, 5, 6 is kind of the usual number, and you basically do a big quiz. And the idea is that it's a really great way of doing a quiz with all your friends, but because you're at the pub, it's kind of a bit of a laugh as well. So there's often a lot of different rounds. When we do our church pub quizzes, for example, we have to dress people up in newspaper, and things like that as well. There's all kinds of like fun things that can happen. But it's such a staple part of kind of the culture that we kind of take that and we just use that when we do those as well.
So I'm hearing you say things like dressing people up in newspaper for a quiz and I'm not following. And that's, again, just me as an American not understanding probably what quiz means for you guys. Because quiz for, like, when I'm saying quiz, I'm thinking question answer, right? So I'm thinking it's on the same lines as what you're saying. But dressing people up in newspaper sounds pretty awesome and different. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we always add some rounds that are slightly more abstract. So an example from the last one we did a few months ago was recreate. I think it was recreate the best three-piece suit out of newspaper on someone from your team, and the winner was awarded the most points. And it was quite hysterical watching people run around the pub garden. I think I even picked up a plant pot, covered it in newspaper, used it as a little hat to make a kind of, a top hat. And we were making suit jackets and ties out of newspaper, attempting to hold them round. Just, yeah, hilarity, really.
That's awesome.
Really good fun.
I mean, that's church, right? So like that's that's in your community, actually hanging out with each other. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for letting me go on a rabbit trail there, because that has nothing to do with our conversation, really. Um, but the kind of going back to the whole COVID-19 thing, right? So there's no social events going on or anything like that. One of the biggest things I think people are scared of when they're coming back to this is the reality of like emotional and mental health, right? So people coming back and just being in this habit for over 40 days at least. I mean, that's where we're at right now as we're recording this. Coming back to reality and not being able to jump back in without having severe depression, anxiety, worry, that kind of stuff going on. What's like a fear that you've got coming in here? Do you have any fears coming back from COVID-19? Do you have anything you're worried about? You're needing to just place trust in God for? Talk to us a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
I think one of the interesting things that we probably find in our community, and I think it's shared across all churches at the moment, is that when you're meeting online, no matter how good your service is, no matter how engaging your Zoom chats are, whatever it is, the relationships that form are often very not cliquey as such, but you're forming small groups of relationships rather than cross relationships across the whole church family. And something that I'm quite acutely aware of is that there's loads of people that are part of our community that I've had zero interaction with since the beginning of kind of all of this stuff and doing church online, purely because I'm not part of their mini hubs. They're not on the worship team, or they're not in any of kind of connected to any of the other things that I'm connected to, and therefore I've not built any relationship with those people at all throughout this period. And so
Yeah.
I think there's a fear or an anxiety almost that when we come back, we've got to make a really conscious effort that those people that we haven't seen for 2, 3, 4 months, however long it is, that we consciously go, well, I've formed my little group and I've chatted to who I've chatted to, but so have they. So how do we re-merge and build some of those bridges again, where they did exist before? It's just that for whatever reason, they've kind of separated apart a little bit. And I think coming on from that is, how do you connect people that are on the fringe? Because I think you've always had those people in any church community that are sat on the outside. Maybe they come infrequently, that they know a couple of people, but they're always very quiet. They don't talk to a lot of people, and they're a great part of the community, and we love to have them there. But you can't do that when it's church online. You can't just sort of sit on the outside. You're either on the Zoom chat with your face up in the small group with the 8 people, or you're just not present. And I think a lot of people choose to not be present because it's easier than being present in that. And they might watch online, and that's great. And we pray that they get what they need and that they meet with God through that. But how do we reconnect with those people in a way that allows them to come back fully integrated into our community? Really, I think.
Yeah, no, that's so good. That's a great reminder. I especially love hearing what you're saying about kind of being with people in their own little communities, and who have I left out, right, of that little group? Because you can't meet with everybody. It's not the same social gathering or instance. It's completely different. So I love what you're saying when it comes to that. I feel the tension of that. So I've got about 50 members of my worship team over here. And for me, that was like the size of the church I just came from, right? So I came from a church plant where there's about 50 people. And now we're over here at a church of like 700 to 1,000, depending on the Sunday. And but the team is like 50. So, so I've got like the whole church to look after, right? That I'm used to. And so, yeah, I've been noticing that with this whole community separation from each other. There's like 6 people I talk to, right? And consistently, just all the time, constantly talking to like 6 people. And the rest of the people, I mean, I need help. I need other people to help me kind of just keep reaching out to them. And yeah, I feel really bad. You know, I just had a conversation with one of my ladies. She messaged me like 3 weeks ago and I just got it. I was like, are you kidding me? And the message was really important. You know, she's talking about things that are going on in her life that are, you know, like need prayer. Her husband was going through a lot of medical issues and I just had dropped the ball from this. And so I had to just like, you know, call her up, apologize, you know, and, man, this is my fault for missing this, but those things are falling through the cracks. And so you're speaking to my heart when you're saying that's a worry, right? Like I feel exactly the same way. When it comes to worship in particular, I'm kind of curious. Let's switch tracks just a little bit. What does worship look like when we come back from COVID-19? What do you? Is there any vision God's kind of leading you into? Is exciting? Like, man, when it comes back, I'm doing this for God. Like, what does that look like for you?
Yes, I was actually praying about this earlier during a little worship time I was having, because it's different at the moment. We're not meeting as a team. I live by myself, therefore my worship team throughout my week is myself. That, you know, there's no one to bounce kind of live ideas off or jam with or anything like that, because, you know, it's really hard to jam over Zoom and things like that because of technical and all that. So it's really reminded me how to press into God for myself, in terms of it's just me and God when we hang out and worship, because that's all it is. But what that kind of has sparked me kind of thinking and praying into is how can we bring some of that back into our Sundays, back into those times when we gather to worship? How can we bring that intimacy that we're experiencing as individuals with God, particularly as worship leaders, when we're sat there? And for me, it's when I'm sat at the keyboard and I'm just worshiping for quite a lot longer than I would do normally, because there's not much else going on. Actually, how can I bring some of that revelation and some of that intimacy and lead from that place more? I think, and I think that it is going to be tough, because we're not used to playing with other people. We've had 2-3 months where we've not done that. So we're going to come back, and that first rehearsal is going to be like, whoa, this is really weird. What are we doing? But my prayer is that actually we've all kind of had these intimate experiences, and actually being able to bring that all together and just worship freely. And I think there's a really cool thing about the fact that so many people are picking up instruments for the first time over this period, or relearning stuff, or just hanging out and jamming away because, you know, they're a bit bored. But by doing that, there's no kind of expectation. There's no kind of performance standard or anything, because it's just you in your living room. But actually, I really hope that some of the heart of that stuff comes into what we do when we gather as well, so that we're really worshiping just from a place of freedom. And it's just, we're just going to go for it, and let's see what God wants to do with that. And hopefully there's a new sound that kind of emerges from that, I think, really.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm encouraged and inspired thinking about that too, like just getting incredibly relational, incredibly just spiritually focused on the moment, and way less about the other things that are around us distracting us from God's presence. And yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's a great word. Thanks for that, David. I got one more thing to ask you, and this is pretty much what the local worship project is all about. And that's just really about how do we serve people in our community. So are there other worship leaders in your area around you, or pastors who are trying to do the worship thing, who just don't really know how to do some technical things, or build groups up together, or, you know, just developing skills? And how do we partner with each other? How do we collaborate and cooperate rather than have competition, right? And compare ourselves with each other and drive ourselves kind of into these little small, narrow facets in our community? How do we try to work together to grab our community for the glory of God without thinking about ourselves, but just working with each other, trusting God for provision, trusting God for His kingdom to come at His time, and not trying to take that on ourselves? So the local worship project, that's what we're all about. And so just asking you right now, how can you be of value to the people around you, and how can they connect with you for some greater skill development? What does that look like?
Sure. I think the biggest thing that I love is creativity. I'm a huge avid fan of being creative and being creative as well. I think in terms of building up when you don't have resource behind you. I think it's always been a passion of mine, and it's just how I've naturally fallen into situations. Is that something that I've learned a lot about is how to build something from what seemed like nothing at the start. And so whether that's very basic kind of music tuition, and how do you nurture a team through learning about music in a way that isn't just a boring exam and going away and doing exam papers on music theory, but actually how do you teach and nurture teams to understand what it means to play in a band, and numbering systems and all that kind of stuff that for some of us it comes really easily, but actually for a lot of people is a huge mountain to climb. And how do you do that safely and with love, and guide people through that, and also just how do you make things, how do you just make a sound to start with? I think so many plants and so many even large churches as well that maybe just don't have those kind of worship leader resources, or they have a couple of people, and it's how do I create a nicer sound from this, and I'm just fed up with it just being me every week. How do you go from that place to, it might still be only be you on the team every week, but how do you create different sounds, and how do you use different things and resources around to cultivate some of that as well, with the aim that hopefully the third thing is that people do start to catch some of that vision and they do want to get involved. And how do you take something from almost nothing and grow a team, but grow it and work with the relationships in that team so that people are supported, but also so that you're always bettering yourself almost in terms of where you're heading, and setting some of that vision and setting some of that heart and time aside to worship, because it's such it looks quite polished and easy when you're kind of stood in the congregation, but there's so much that goes in behind the scenes that so many people just don't see. And for those of us that lead worship, we know all the kind of backroom stuff that kind of goes on, and I think so much of that is just experience and knowledge that you just kind of put in your backpack and you carry around after years of doing it. And it's a really good opportunity to share some of that wisdom and say, hey, have you ever thought about approaching a set list like this? Because this has worked, for years. This is how I've always approached it. And then people go, oh, I've never thought of that. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So those are just some of the things that I've found really.
That's awesome. So if I'm hearing you right, and please just correct me, okay? But what people like in your area, if they want to contact you, get in touch with you about developing anything, one is this whole idea of just being creative and building something from the ground up. Like I'm hearing that from you super loud and clear. Just if you don't know where to start, get in touch with you, because if you hit a wall and you're just like, I can't see how to get out of this room, I need to call David. Right? I need his advice on how to see through this a little bit differently. So that's the one and major thing that I'm hearing that you can be of an asset to in the people in your community. And then the second thing I'm really hearing from you is just this whole idea of building that community. So not just building something that is from the ground up, but that's almost like a maintenance mode. So like we're going to maintain this excitement together. We're going to pursue this really high level of production together. But we're going to do it in a way that is honoring and glorifying to God, because we are building them on the foundation of relationship and the gospel underneath those things. We're building this strong structure from the ground up that is maintaining itself in the future, and hopefully then even multiplying itself in the future after that. So again, bullet point, I'm hearing from you. If people want to get in contact with you, it's because you can help them see where they're at and where their vision is. I want to get here. I've got an idea, but I don't know how to get there. So call David. He can creatively walk you through that process and give you some ideas. And then second is that maintaining of those people and building the relationships on top of that new thing they just developed. So is that kind of where we're going with that?
Yeah. And the kind of the small caveat thing I'd like to add as well is that we as a church exist for non-Christians. So we have so many people in our church that are from unchurched backgrounds, and therefore are new to faith, and they're the kind of first generation new to faith, you might say, for that. And then therefore a lot of the stuff that we do in worship and how we do things around that is based on that kind of journey as well. So another thing that I try really hard to do is how can we bring Jesus to people that have never met Jesus before in worship, that have no experience of what this looks like, and they've never heard grown men singing in a room before. Like how do you cultivate an atmosphere where people can feel comfortable coming into that for the first time, whether or not they've ever been to church before? And I think that's a really important thing to say, because often we start designing church for church people, and I think sometimes we need to design church for people that aren't yet in the church but are going to be in the church, and therefore that's a really important kind of skill set and different thing that's really important.
That's good. No, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of that. Now, my last thing for you then is just how can people contact you, knowing that that's something that you can be a resource for with them? How can they just get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Sure, yeah. So Facebook is probably the easiest and best way. Just drop me a friend request, and then drop me a message, or whichever around you want to do that. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, but Facebook is probably the kind of the top easy place to kind of start a conversation, really.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, David. I appreciate you coming on the show and being part of this local project. And we just want to pray for you and just make sure that everything's going well in your community. Can I pray for us real quick before we take off?
Sure.
All right, let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, I just want to come to you today and say thank you for David Pickett and just everything he's doing in his local area, just focusing on getting people who don't know you yet to being able to just find deep relationship with you in their local communities. Just a beautiful idea and testimony that he is just trying to live like you in his life and go meet people where they are and be a part of what they are doing in order to further the kingdom in his area. Just pray that you would bless his ministry and bless the people who are working with him for your purpose and for your achievements. I pray that you would just give them strength so that they can endure, they can be patient, give them eyes to see what is around them, just discernment and wisdom in understanding what is next after all of this in COVID-19, but even just in general day to day, what is next? What is your will? What is your Spirit saying? What is he leading us to do? So we thank you. Pray blessings on David and his ministry. Love you, Father. Praise in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you so much for staying through to the end of this episode. David's an incredible guy. I had a great conversation with him. We actually had it twice because the first time we recorded this, we had some technical difficulties on my end. And so he was gracious enough to pop back in again and re-record everything and let me get this episode out even later because I got sick. So thank you again to David. I'm gonna have his links below for contact for you. So if you wanna get in touch with him with anything he offered today, go ahead and contact him now. And we will, as soon as we have our website up, we'll have him up there ready for you to see and get in contact with. Thank you so much. And you guys have a great day. See you on the next episode.